What's up, y'all? I wanted to do something a little bit different. So for this video, we are going to do 3 Deepwoods horror stories. You can let me know if you like it, and if not, I'll never do this again. But for now, brace yourselves, because this is a Lithos horror. Weirdness in Tennessee. On a road trip, a friend and I decided to stop at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary and camp nearby. We were familiar with the prison's history, and we had been reading about it on the drive. Another friend joined us, someone deeply interested in the spiritual side of things and eager to look for ghosts. That was mostly her motivation, though all of us were curious about the prison itself. Seeing the prison in person is overwhelming. The prison is a gray, massive structure pressed directly against the mountain, surrounded on all sides by the Tennessee woods. The trees and the hills feel alive, almost breathing, and in the middle of it sits this enormous block of concrete. There were no tours or concerts that day, which are very common. The grounds themselves were quiet. We parked in a gravel lot and walked towards the building. When we reached the courtyard, we were surprised to find the gate was open. There were no signs telling us to stay out, so we stepped inside and began looking around. 2 men were throwing a ball for a large dog. We noticed them, but didn't think much of it until the dog wandered over to us. One of the men followed him towards us and started talking, not to ask where we were from, but why we were there. He pressed us about whether we were part of a tour. When he realized we weren't, he then said he was contracted by the owner to do work on the property and that we weren't supposed to be inside. He didn't explain what he was doing or why the gate was left wide open. Once it was clear we were just visitors, his tone turned curt and was insistent. We left the building without arguing. We stayed on the grounds and continued walking around. A friend commented on how strange it was that somebody on official business would have a loose dog in the courtyard, but we didn't dwell on it. Our focus was the prison itself. Not long after, a white crossover pulled up into the lot and drove straight towards us. Inside were a woman and child. The woman got out immediately and started pushing us towards the exit, saying her man had already spoken to us and we weren't allowed to be there. My friend pushed back verbally, but we left anyway. As we did, the woman followed us out and shut the parking lot gate behind us. Once outside, we checked the posted rules and confirmed that visitors were allowed and that stopping us there was common. That night we returned. The parking lot and the outer lot waited. While inside the car, we saw a truck slowly drive up in the road towards the prison. We were in the dark and apparently unseen. The truck reached the end of the gravel road and then turned and crept back the way it came. We talked it over. If we drove straight in and got run off again, that would be the end of it. But we approached on foot, skirting the road and climbing the hill first. We could still explore and then enter the lot normally afterwards. So we climbed the grassy hillside besides the road, keeping out of the parking lights. At intervals, a bright beam from a light swept upwards into the sky from the prison. We assumed it was part of the property, maybe a spotlight left running. As we moved along the hill, we heard what sounded like a dirt bike somewhere beyond the lot. The sound echoed off the hills and then abruptly stopped. Not long after, we heard screaming, distant, panicked screaming. We froze and listened. Then it happened again. We whispered to each other, trying to decide if it might be somebody else on the grounds, maybe part of a tour. That's when we noticed something in the darkness nearby. It was a wild pig. We hadn't seen it at first. It shifted and then started moving towards us. Without hesitation, my friend grabbed both of us and we pulled us back. He'd seen wild pigs before, and we retreated and ran back to the car. By then, it felt certain that other people were actively on the property. The sweeping light, the engine noises, it all suggested activity. So this time we drove in openly as if we belonged there. Along the road, we saw the same truck off to the side. The child in the back was playing with a flashlight aiming into the sky. The man stood behind the truck running a chainsaw. Nearby, a woman sat in her white crossover, watching the road. She pulled out quickly and blocked our path. Rolling down her window, she immediately threatened to call the police. My friend told her that we checked the hours and new visitors were allowed. She claimed to know the owner and refused to give a name or contact information. We left again. Once back on the road, we called the police ourselves. They confirmed that we were allowed to be there, but advised us not to return that night, saying it might not be safe. We never learned what those people were doing in that prison. Any single moment from that night could probably be explained on its own, but taken together, the behavior, the lights and sound, it all added up to something unsettling. And that's what has stayed with us to this day. Small creature. This is a story I've shared with a handful of people until I came across this. A little background about me. I grew up in the woods, camping, fishing, and hunting. I'm comfortable out there, and I've seen about everything you would expect to see. I've been watching horror movies since I was about 10, so very little actually scares me anymore. About 10 years ago, my wife and I rented a cabin at a campground just to check the place out. It was the last of 3 cabins sitting on the edge of the forest in the far back corner of the campground. There wasn't this wasn't some deep backwoods location either. We had cell service, and it was just outside Bedford, Pennsylvania. The campground itself was pretty empty. That evening was completely normal. We had a campfire. Nothing strange happened. The only thing that stood out was seeing flying squirrels zip past us, which was uncommon, but honestly was kind of cool. Eventually we put the fire out. My wife went inside to the cabin to get ready for bed. The cabin had a small open porch with a light above it. I went inside too, but my cousin called, so I stepped back out onto the porch to talk. I remember pacing around while I was on the phone. When I reached the far side of the porch, the side facing the woods, I suddenly froze. I'm getting goosebumps typing this out again. Standing there was something small, bipedal, and gray looking. It wasn't moving. It was just staring at me. It couldn't have been more than 2 feet tall. The color is what really struck with me. It didn't blend into the darkness at all. I couldn't make out any real facial features, but I slowly backed towards the doorway without ever taking my eyes off of it. It was just off the porch, maybe 5 feet away, right at the edge of the woods where the light stopped. My wife later told me that she had never seen me that terrified in all the years we had been together. She immediately knew something was off. My cousin said I went completely silent on the phone before hanging up. About 30 minutes later, I worked up the nerve to step back outside. Whatever it was gone. The next morning was completely normal. We went for a hike, came back, and made lunch. After eating, we were inside the cabin when suddenly everything started shaking. One of the loudest sounds I've ever heard roared overhead. It only lasted for a few seconds. We went outside and saw other people in the campground doing the same thing, looking around confused. Then it happened. Fighter jets, flying extremely low over the area. I have no idea what they were searching for, but they were searching for something, or maybe they were just doing routine military training, but whatever it was highly unsettling. After they paused and passed, we backed up and left. We've been back to that campground since. Nothing strange has ever happened. I just don't stay in that cabin anymore. Last year, a friend told me about this. He was into the supernatural and mentioned the Pukwudgie, and I looked it up, and honestly, it's possible. Part of me always wondered if it was something else entirely, something extraterrestrial, especially with the fighter jets. The next day. The devil. This is a story, really a series of encounters that has been passed down for generations in the rural mountain community where I grew up. Everyone around here knows about it. Most people have experienced themselves, even if they've refused to talk about it. In this part of the world, my father and his family were raised. Ghost stories and tales of the unexplained creatures roaming the deep hollers and woods are common. One legend has always stood out to me more than the others. I first came across this back in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. People had submitted countless local legends and strange experiences, but one account lodged firmly in my mind. It went like this. Whenever you're walking along a rural road, you will hear someone or something walking directly beside you in the woods across the road. If you stop, it stops. If you keep walking, it matches your pace. It will even mimic your footsteps. Many locals have experienced this, and it is deeply unsettling. From the moment I read that, I was hooked. Growing up, I asked my family members and neighbors who lived in the area if they heard of it. Every single one of them gave me the same answer. It was the devil, or something demonic. Some even shared experiences of their own. One of the most chilling came from my uncle, who used to hunt raccoons late at night. One evening, well after dark, with the moon barely lighting the trees, he was deep in the woods with his pack of hunting dogs, dogs that were fearless and loyal under any circumstances. But that night, something was different. The dogs suddenly refused to go any further when they tranced into the woods. Whatever they had seen or sensed terrified the animals. My uncle tried everything to urge them forward, but they just froze in place and started trembling. Rifle in hand, he scanned the darkness. He couldn't see or hear anything, but the dogs clearly could. They began to cover, whining in fear. Then my uncle heard movement in the brush around him, fast and deliberate, circling him. He knew immediately that whatever was out there was not something to confront, especially alone and at his age. He began backing towards home. The dogs followed close behind, but the Fang followed too, staying just out of sight in the pitch-black woods. When my uncle picked up his pace, it did too. When he finally broke into a run, it ran after him. It chased him all the way through the clearing at the edge of his property before finally stopping. My uncle ran inside, locked the door and window, and didn't step outside until the morning. He told his family what happened the next day and was still visibly shaken when he recounted it. Years later, my grandmother, his sister, confirmed the story, remembering how disturbed he was when he recounted it. Another story surfaced when I asked around, one from my mother. She told me about a family friend who had lived alone in the old house and deep in the woods. He loved the isolation and the tranquility, or so he thought. As a child, she remembered seeing him come to my grandmother's house early one day, sitting down and having coffee. They did this all the time. This morning, though, he always looked exhausted, pale, and hollowed eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. When my grandmother finally asked him what was wrong, he confessed that something had taken residence in his house. He described a demon that had tormented him nightly, rattling the windows, shaking the house on its foundation, throwing plates, forks, and silverware all over the floor. The front door would slam open, shut on its own. It always happened late at night, and it never allowed him to sleep. This went on for months. One night it escalated. The entity began hurling plates at his head, as if trying to seriously injure him or kill him. With nowhere to escape and no neighbors nearby, he fell on his knees and began praying, denouncing the presence in the name of Jesus Christ and commanding it to leave. The reaction was immediate and violent. The activity intensified. More objects flew. The house shook harder. Terrified, he fled and ran into the forest, blindly searching for a road. After hours of running, he finally found one and followed it all the way to my grandmother's house by the morning. There, he told her everything that had happened the night before. He said that while running for the woods, he could hear the demon chasing him, never stopping, never falling behind. Even once he had reached the road, he could still hear it pacing him from behind the trees, just staying out of sight, following him the entire way.